Welcome to the Happy Mindset, where we use the power of language and storytelling to help you find your voice. Today's episode is episode number 51, and today's episode title is Your Personal Voice Formula. So today I'm joined by Veronika Zaytseva. Veronika was just a girl when she left her home country of Russia to pursue the journey that would lead to her understanding what she was set to do in her life. Having traveled through Asia, she took a longer than expected stop in Canada, where Veronika is currently working on her vision to help more people build authentic relationships with themselves. She then uses this experience to help them translate their uniqueness into their personal brands. So in today's episode, Veronika talks about how she's going about building a coaching practice on the side. She talks about how traveling and studying different cultures helped to open her mind. She talks about external visions and how they led to her crashing emotionally. She talks about how she has rewritten her mental programming. She talks about how slowing down can change her life, and she talks about her personal voice formulas, which she's going to share with you on the podcast today. So I hope you take some insights, some lessons from Veronika. She's going about figuring out her own life and figuring out the impact she wants to have in the world today in her own unique way. So I hope you can take some lessons from the podcast. Again, if you enjoyed today's podcast, I'd love it if you can leave a rating and a review so more people can find the podcast. And if you want to head on over to Facebook, join the group there. It's the best place to reach out to me and ask me questions and to connect with other people. So again, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and thanks again for listening. Thanks for taking the time out today to join us, Veronika.
Thanks so much, Dennis, for having me. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure. So my first question is, who are you and what are you doing in the world today?
So my name is Veronika. I'm originally from Russia, so baked there, and I had the chance to travel through multiple countries until I landed to Canada. Currently, I am working as a strategist for a crowdfunding company named Fundraiser, as well as I am on a journey of building my virtual coach consulting practice online.
Cool. So you're at the moment, you're still in your traditional job and you're also doing your coach consulting on the side, you're building that up. When did you start having two different things going on, like a career path and your coaching business on the side?
Great question. I've been always hustling and running two things at the same time. Since I was about 14, 13 years old, I've been always engaged into something, either in MLM or in helping my parents run a business, or while studying at university, I was also doing the business, trying to do consultancy on the side in relation to health and wellness, as well as doing my part-time job as a student as well. So it's been a passion of mine until about 2 years ago, when I've noticed that I really love working with people. And people started coming to me for advice, for giving them some clarity on actually what they want to do, the things that they want to get joy from, their own visions. So I realized that I had a niche for that. And I started doing mentorship and coaching, a little bit of that, just as a hobby for about a year and a half, and until I officially stepped into that about several months ago. And currently I'm mentoring a few students internationally. And it's been quite a journey. I worked with immigrants. I worked with people who just simply reached out to me because we shared a similar journey path, and we exchanged the lessons between each other. It's fascinating to work with people, and that's why I see myself doing that in the future, going forward for sure.
So what's your own journey been like? Why have you been drawn to helping other people?
I have an interesting journey. Funny enough, it happened so that I never felt like I fit in wherever I was. Apologies for that. When I was back home in Russia, I wanted to be a basketball star. I worked hard. I woke up at 5 a.m. I had a morning routine. I had practices twice a day. Until once I was given a chance to travel abroad and see the cultures, see how the world actually lives. Upon my arrival back from the journey, what I realized is something was off. I had that feeling that I needed to go away to pursue something else. So I left at the age of 15. I left and I started to study cultures, live in multiple countries in Asia, like China, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, travel a bit over there. I lived in New Zealand for a while until I landed to Canada. And it's been a very exploratory journey for me personally, because what I realized is there is more to just goals and there is more to just ambitions that are imposed on you by your family, by your loved ones, by the environment you're in. So what happened to me is that at a certain point of my life, when I was about 22, I had a crash, emotional crash. And that crash happened because I was driven by the ambitions and the visions that have been given to me, but not the visions and ambitions that I have chosen for myself to live by. It's been a tough time. And what I felt is I could not do any excuses for myself anymore on that journey. It was painful emotionally, it was painful physically. I was not next to my family, so I wasn't going through the time with my family, although they knew they were supporting me somehow. I had to reroute everything about myself. I had to rewrite my personal story. I had to reprogram all of the old programs that's been in my head to all of the programs that I have now through practices, through NLP, through meditation, through mentorships, through coaching, through doing all the courses and works to fully understand what's actually meaningful to me, what do I stand by, and where do I want to go, independent of anybody else's opinion, independent on all of the trends that are out there, independent of what the world expects of you, but just driven by the matter of what do you expect of yourself and how much are you willing to go for it.
So at 22, what were your first steps looking like? Where did you even begin? Because that's quite a big task to start rewriting your script, reprogramming your mental models.
I knew that the problem was in mental conditioning. And the reason I knew that is because when I was 11, I picked up a book by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich. That book became, back then when I was 11, it became a game changer for me in the sense that I've learned to take care of my physical health back then, going down from 96 kilograms, which is more than 200 pounds, to about 61 kilogram at this moment. It's been a hell of a journey back then when I was 11, so it took a couple of years to do that. However, what I've noticed when I did that is I enjoyed it. I enjoyed myself. I enjoyed the journey. I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed how I felt about myself. And I was just in the moment doing that. I wasn't scared of the fact that, oh, I won't do it. I was just doing it. It's just taking and doing it. So fast forwarding it to 22, interestingly enough, that kind of model did not work for me anymore. And that's what I realized. So I knew that the model I used was a little bit superficial back then. I needed to go a little bit deeper. And to do that, I started reading a lot about the mind, about how the brain works, mostly focusing on NLP, because positive thinking on its own doesn't make sense. It's just not working. It's a very superficial concept if you don't know how to put it into practice for yourself, because it is very subjective. Positive thinking for each person will be different depending on the situation they're in, depending on what's driving them at this specific point of time, what emotion, what life experience. So that's why I started learning more about the mind, taking more time off to just be with myself and not reading any literature, any information, because it's just clutter if you don't know why you're consuming it. Reading 50 books a year is very easy. It is super easy. For instance, this year I already read about 40, and it's only month of May. But to read books, to understand, comprehend, and actually use that information for yourself in a positive way, that's the key to your successful personal development. And that's what I did. I had to declutter myself, strip myself off, study the psychology of mind, psychology of self, emotional intelligence, as well as a little bit of physics, thanks to my mentor, and philosophy, in order to better understand myself and go forward.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's delving deeper. So you had that frame of reference at 11 where you've already seen the capacity of change, but you were saying it was operating at more of a superficial level. But I guess that gave you that frame of reference that something different is possible. But then how did you start understanding that it was the application part that was more important than the passively taking on information? Did you know that from the start when you started NLP and the different things? Or did you learn that through time, that you have to start figuring out what works for you on a personal level?
If I analyze two profiles of me back then and now, when I was losing weight back then, I was driven by my ego, to be honest with you, because I wanted to prove to myself that I can actually do that. And plus to everybody else that, yeah, I can be a skinny little girl and you're never gonna call me a big fatty sausage again. So that was driven by ambition, by ego, and also by fear of not being enough, funny enough. If I'm to translate it to this day and thinking about that, what I did back then, it required of me extra amount of energy. I could have done it simpler if I really felt and if I really well understood why that was so much important to me, why I wanted to lose weight, how I wanted to feel, what was the vision of myself without having that big weight back then. But instead, I just pushed myself, pushed without reflecting on any of the actions that I've been doing. That, yes, they led me to a result, of course. I love the result, but it was a very short-term effect. Until actually a little bit later in my life, since about 16 to 18, when I started to implement in the mindset of having a good lifestyle and wellness as a part of my lifestyle. So this became just a simple journey. It just became so natural to me to eat healthy, to exercise, that I don't even have to think about this anymore today. It just became a part of me. So that's the difference. That's why it's important to understand simple things like what matters, why it's like that, what do you need right now, what do you want to be driven by in the next few times.
Like, finding out what matters to you, sometimes it's actually quite difficult because it does require actually taking a step back and asking yourself more introspective questions and stop like bullshitting yourself. So how do you go about doing that?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow. I don't even know where to start because this is very subjective. And Dennis, from yours and I conversation a little bit earlier, I can adhere to that. And I think you can adhere to that as well. To understand what's important to you, you gotta be naked in front of yourself. As hilarious as it might sound. Naked in the sense that not allowing yourself to think even of what your ego wants. You have to be true to yourself. You have to look in the mirror and actually ask yourself, what do you need at this moment? Where do you want to be? And how you want to, do you have any idea of how to get there? Do you actually need a Ferrari right now? Or do you actually need to think about how do I cover the needs for my family at this moment? Right? For me to go about that, I had to battle my not relationships, but conflicts that I thought I had in the past with my family. Because I felt that a lot of things that served as a barrier to me growing in terms of personal development further were hidden in the family. So I went to psychologist, and we worked through my parental frameworks over that. So I established a fantastic relationship with my dad. I've established a fantastic relationship with my mom, and I've never been happier since. So that's the first major step that I did for me. The second major step that I did for me is I figured out that I wasn't, because I was so much in a rush, I was not slowing down at all in my life. I needed to slow down myself and reflect on life. How would I do that? Having realized that I have a lot of energy in my hands, I came up with this, what I call my personal voice formula, which allows for me to hear who I am and what I actually want at this moment, or allows for ideas to come to my brain. So my voice triangle consists of action, the action I do with my hands right now. It can be drawing, it can be photographing, it can be even washing dishes or cleaning the house, believe it or not. Because when we do something physically, our brain is too busy. It is busy trying to make sure that your physical state and your hands are actually moving. So it doesn't control your mind, it doesn't control your thinking capacity. So I talk about that in the form of an aquarium. So your head is aquarium, right? So when a fish is busy eating, then the water and bubbles, they just float around. So you have energy in your head that, hits off the balls of your scalp, and then your ideas start popping up. I'm not sure if you noticed that before or not, when you did something and a great idea came to your head.
It's like
That's
do you know the diffuse mode of thinking, the focus mode and the diffuse mode? And the diffuse mode is when we think of like creative ideas because we get our brain has the capacity to like just connect the dots in a different way. That's my understanding.
I haven't read about that, to be honest with you. I mostly discover those things. First, I discover those things sensually. I first feel them, and then I come to explore that in the concept of physics or psychology or neuroscience, as you just mentioned. So for me, to understand and hear what I'm actually to say, or what I want to say to myself, I gotta do something. So then I have to do that for some time, and then I have to see or hear what thoughts resonates in my head. And the thought that resonates in my head, and I feel connected in the area of diaphragm. That's where your heart zone is. That's where I understand that's what I'm actually thinking about. That's what's important to me. That's what matters. A thing that causes this joyful connection just for a second. So that's a triangular voice formula for me. Drawing, for instance, then acting upon that. So doing that consistently, training your brain into doing that. So every time you draw, you have creative ideas come into your head. And then you resonate between those ideas, which idea actually is yours and which idea is not. And then you go from there. And then you explore and you try out and you do it through a trial and error. It's a longer way, but it's fun because it allows for you to amplify your own energy. By that I mean is that by amplifying on the ideas that you actually resonate with, you create a larger field of positive energy around yourself because you're filled with more joy. And when your glass is full, you become a magnet for anything you want in your life.
Okay, so it's resonating, identifying the thoughts, and so the second step. How do you discover this? Was this your own little process of like drawing thoughts in your head, and then how do you actually how do you figure out like, is it just like kind of meditated, like a flow state where there's just thoughts going through your head, and then you kind of you just kind of realize that thought stands out more than like what does it actually look like?
That's why I said it's a very subjective area. It is very thin and gray area. Yeah. And unfortunately, I don't have a psychology degree or neuroscience degree behind my back to back up what I discovered for myself personally, but it works.
Yeah.
My brain is a machine. It just happens so that it thinks, and it always comes up with those ideas and things to act upon. However, I have to be selective, right? And to be able to filter what's important to me, I gotta use the thing which has the highest energy, the strength. It's in my hands. I gotta do something with my hands to understand and filter all the clutter in my head. Well, not the clutter, the idea pool that's been collected in my head. And while I do that, I select out of that pool certain ideas that resonated with me. They are in my head, in a mental space, so I create a space in my head where I just store them. And when I draw, it's, as example, it's just, I'm focusing on my physical movement. So my head is not involved into that. It's automatic. It's just like you picking up a pen. You don't have to think about that. It's just neural response. Same thing here. You paint, but you have a free space, head space in your head. And then what I do is that I pick up a few ideas that are important and I amplify on them. I expand on them.
I guess you're in a way you're distracting your analytical brain Because I find when I try and figure something out analytically in my head, sometimes it just confuses me more and more and more. But when there's more of a relaxation to it, when I'm more distracted, yeah, then that's when something either resonates or it doesn't. So is it like a practical thing that you would take action on? Like, for example, I want to do a podcast or I want to do this or that? Or is it other different types of thoughts or ideas that you can get clarity on from that?
Any idea, honestly, anything that makes you tickle, you can use this mental concept of mind to be able to help you understand what triggers you. So if you want to write a book, for instance, how you can go about that? You can, for example, sit into meditation, if that's something of yours, and imagine like how it's gonna feel if you're gonna be giving an interview to a podcast or an interview of your dream, right? How it's gonna feel, and see what are you saying, what kind of text you're talking about, what when the interview is asking you why you have written this book, what inspired you to write this book. So create that conversation with yourself and then see what answers are you giving, and those answers are going to be your thoughts that matter to you, or at least ideas that matter to you. And then what you do is because you look at them, you resonate at the end. Okay, interesting. Now, what action can I take on a few of them? Okay, I'm going to research this idea. I'm going to do this idea. I'm going to check if this has been done before. And by doing this research, by doing action, you amplify the effect. And by amplifying the effect, you understand whether this idea is viable or not.
Okay.
For you.
Is there many different fields like you draw on that have gotten you to the stage where you can come up with ideas and frameworks for yourself?
Yes. For instance, when I work, when I talk to somebody, I do a lot of doodling. Because doodling helps me memorize and structure information for myself. So through images. I sometimes find myself more engaged into conversation when I draw, or I find myself expanding on ideas if we have a huge meeting through drawing, because through drawing it just happens so that my headspace is free and I can actually deliver a good proposition. I can come up with an idea for a client instead of just sitting, looking at the problem and thinking about that. But that's just how my brain works specifically. If I have an emotional, something that's been going on emotionally, that would be painting. Because painting in colors, for me personally, shows which areas of my life are being under effect, if you say. So for instance, if I use a lot of red, then something is off. If I use a lot of black, something's definitely off. If I use a lot of green, it means that depending on the shade of green, something related to financial field bothers me. If I use a lot of orange, it's personal life, so relationships, and all of that. So using a little bit ideas of coloring and painting and trying to understand what's going on in your emotional state, if you are not that skillful enough analytically to understand what's going on inside yourself.
Okay, so you're quite visual, and it's interesting to see like how different brains work and like how you make sense of things. But then, is that coming from like different areas of study that you've gone through? Like, is there any like areas that would stand out in your mind that this is where it's coming from, or is this coming more from like just knowing yourself better?
I would say it's experience, life experience, because I've been always working, and drawing specifically for me comes out of probably algorithms. I loved drawing in the past, but I loved Lego more. If I think back to my childhood, Lego because I loved constructing things, because I loved creating patterns, I loved creating flows, I loved creating structures. So that evolved through my study, of course, through me studying computer science, through me studying marketing, business, political science, chain reactions, biology, you name it, personal development. Everything is a chain of reaction. Everything is a chain of reaction. And for me, drawing came out of algorithms. Honestly, I think that's where it came out from, because at some point of your life, it becomes starting to live based on an algorithm. You want to have a more creative approach to your life, and you want to think a little bit beyond just the scheme, the life plan, the 5-year life plan, which honestly to me doesn't make sense at this moment of life. You want to allow for yourself to breathe and live creativity. And that's when probably drawing came from, because I was able to use drawing to put things that I do daily into a creative form that helped me express myself a little bit better. And it helps me to understand myself better as well.
That's interesting. So would you say you're more logical or more creative, or a balance of the two, like 50-50, or what would you say?
I'm very analytical, not by choice. It's by being growing, it's by being trained, by growing up in another country, by following the rules of cultures where I've been to. That's where analytics comes from. And I'm very creative, but I discovered that at the late point of my life. Not at the late, but at the later, which is about in my 20s, because nobody tells you that you cannot run a business and not be creative. On the opposite, you are creative when you run a business. Because if you're not creative, then you can make any money for yourself. I'm just using the most vivid example because these days everybody is trying to build something of their own. But it doesn't mean that you cannot be creative. You can be creative in doing your emails at work. And that would be your extent of creativity.
Yeah. Creative and following your own path too. So like, how has things evolved for you as you've practically tried to navigate the world and you've tried to follow your heart at the same time and create your own path?
Could you paraphrase your question once again?
Yeah, so like, how are you managing to combine living in the world, practically paying the bills, practically gaining the skills, and also being true to yourself, finding out who you are, what's meaningful for you? How have you gone about? What are some of the core things you're doing right now that's helping you to follow your own path?
Great question. And I think the answer to that would be simple. The main thing is discipline. Discipline is something that helps me keep myself structured, yet allows for me to have my downtime to express myself. That's a big one. Second one is I have mentors a lot of mentors which I'm thankful to and will be thankful till the end of my life, because those people are the people who believe in me the most and who support me at times when sometimes things get hard, and that's okay. That's the best thing. Relationships, building true, meaningful, long-term relationships. That's my focus. It's not about how many people you know. It's about what quality of people you know. What value do you bring to each other? That's what's meaningful to me, and I remember that. I have a morning formula as well, which I follow every day routinely. And I read my vision, I read my mission statement, I read where I want to go. It doesn't mean that it has to be solid concrete and 100% figured out. It's just to help you set yourself up for the day, help yourself stay on track. That's what's most important. And again, the reason I don't say that gym or healthy food are the things that help me to stay and practice my analytical and creative side at the same time is because it became a part of me. The moment when a thing becomes a part of you, it's just your life principle, and you can't eradicate it out of yourself. You just do it naturally because it became your habit. Right? It's your pattern now. That's why those things are not on my list, but it's more about people, more about downtime, more about self-expression, and of course, mentorship. Everybody needs mentor. Everybody, even the most successful people, have mentors and will seek for advice from people in their circles. So yeah, those are the most important things.
So the mission and the vision, when did you start creating that for yourself?
I had that, the vision and the mission I had for quite some time in my life. However, it wasn't polished enough. That's what I figured out until I met one of my mentors who helped me to make it clear. And vision and mission, and you see, another thing is when you do personal development on a superficial level, your vision and missions changes. It can change with the year, it can change with a certain period of your life, and that's okay. That's totally fine because we change as people. However, if you want to have a long-term transformational effect on yourself and just keep on growing and improving, it's good to have a baseline vision and then build around it. Everything you do just has to be built around it. So mine rounded up to what I have it to be right now, just in my late 23, 24. So right now. And that's totally fine because everybody has their own time. Everybody has, their own destiny, how they come to that. And all I ask is give yourself time for it to show up as bright as you want to see it. That's it.
That's good. What is your mission right now? What's your baseline mission?
Mission specifically, it's a very long-term mission, but it is a mission of building a community of women leaders and mentors who are gonna support each other and create the environment of love and self-love. And why I'm talking about love and self-love, because you cannot change the world until you grow yourself, until you focus on the things that are important to you, and until you figure out the life philosophy that you are led by. And I want to help to build that community in whatever form it's gonna be. We don't know what's gonna happen in 20 years to our planet, right? However, just so that it's there and women help each other grow, develop, mentor, and support. Because what I found specifically is that even on my own example, for quite some time I didn't appreciate myself enough back then in my late teens, early 20s. And that's totally fine. And I would really love for that not be the case going forward.
Mhm. So when it comes to like the environment, like how do you set up an environment where the conditions are right for this sort of transformational work? How do you see the environment in the situation?
You mean how do I adjust to the environment if it doesn't work for me?
How do you adapt your environment over time, given your experience so far? How are some key things that can help somebody to adapt and change their environment? Like somebody right now could be listening to this and they like all these ideas, but they're like in a situation where they don't see the people around them, they don't see the opportunities right now. Do you have any advice for somebody to start creating their own environment?
Yeah, of course. Uh, you can only create your environment only if you know what's important to you. So, what are your values? What are your needs? What are your life principles? Honestly, basic life principles, work and personal life principles. If your personal life principle is health and wellness, hey, you have all the right to sign up for the gym next to your house and go and hang out with health and wellness guys. It's that simple. Everything goes down to such simple basics, and it's interesting. The simpler it is, so much better it is for you to move on, to do things you want to do. It's important to you. If you want to start a podcast, understand what you value, what value does it bring to you, what value do you bring to others, and just do it. And just step by step, one recording every month. You never know. As long as you get pleasure. I'm not sure how you started the podcast, Dennis, but
Well, I started
I remember
talking.
you had like
It came from like what did I want to see in the world? And it was like it basically came from the desire to like get the information out there that was helping me to change my life. That's basically where it came from. And over time, as I started doing it more and more, I started realizing that I'm speaking to a lot of interesting people here, making a lot of new connections. I'm learning more stuff. I can ask them questions that I want to find out more about, get different perspectives. So, like, yeah, it's basically a simple desire, a simple question. Like you just said there, and change everything, pretty much.
exactly. And I also remember that for you, it was important a matter of figuring out the voice and linguistics, how linguistics affects how we interpret the world, right? And I think for you, it's also been a driver, right?
Yeah,
To create a
definitely. I
podcast.
want to get across the message that like we're listening. So like a big pain point in my life was that I always thought I was listening to people and hearing what they were saying. I didn't realize there was a huge like level of my own thinking that was between me and the person. So I was hearing things that I thought they were saying they might have necessarily been saying. So like a big part for me is like, okay, if you reconnect your own voice first, you can listen better because you have less going on in your head to begin with because you don't have this like huge desire to be understood by everybody else first. So yeah, the language part. So then a large part of that is finding your own words to understand yourself.
Exactly. And you see, because you identify that it's important to you, you value what you're going to figure out from that. And
Yeah,
that's what prompted you to action, right?
yeah. It's I
So,
suppose figuring out what's been some of your biggest pain points growing up as well. So like you can create something for your former self who was going through that pain and couldn't articulate why they felt that way. So that's another way of looking at it.
true. I highly agree with you. Highly, highly agree with you.
Cool. So, yeah, no, I like that because it is a tricky one when you look at the environment. You're trying to change it. From looking at it, it's overwhelming. But like you're saying there, the simple questions can shift it on its own over time. True action as well, of course. But but so
Another,
how? Yeah.
go ahead.
No, far away.
I was just gonna add, if somebody has trouble creating the environment they want, the easiest thing is two easiest things that I recommend is first draw the environment you want to have. Honestly, you can draw 6 scenes, like what your environment looks like, or imagine in your head what environment you want to have, and then compare it to the environment you have right now. What do you want to have? As simple as it can be childish drawing, you don't have to be an artist to draw that. And what do you have right now? And what steps can you take? And why it is important to you? That's it. It's just simple. There is no need to overcomplicate. There is no need to overthink about that.
What's your thoughts actually on imagery? Like, as in, I guess I use it for language learning and different things where your subconscious mind just picks up on the imagery without you even knowing it, being aware of it. Are you a believer in that, or what are your thoughts on that?
I am a big believer on that because it happens so that every human has almost equal capacity to develop either visual, sensorial, or listening skills to a better extent than another field. For me personally, my most well-developed ones are listening and drawing. So when somebody is telling me something, when I'm in a meeting, I think in pictures, I think in imagery. And that's why, for me, even when I strategize, I think in pictures myself. So using my own example, I can adhere to the fact that it's true. It's 100% true. It's if you show yourself imagery as a child, let's think about that. As a child, and it's a negative imagery. For instance, in a family where a dad abused mom. So the imagery that can be created that in a child's head, that I don't want to be like that. And because a child is not trained, right? He doesn't know what mind is. It's just a collection of imagery that's spinning in front of his head. So the mentality that can develop out of that can be, oh, I don't want to be like my dad. It means that I will never raise my hand on my mom, right? Or on a woman. Or something different. Depends on everybody's different psychology states. I just gave example of an imagery because it's the easiest one.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were going to add some more with it. Yeah.
Well, I thought I triggered the thought in you.
No, I thought you were adding more there. I was just listening. But yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, like the imagery. Basically, keep it simple. Know yourself. Is kind of the messages that I'm getting from you there. And the last thing, so how would somebody go about finding you if they want to find out more about what you're doing, or if they want to work with you? How would they find you online?
Sure. The easiest way to find me is to hunt me down on LinkedIn. I practically live there. I believe you have a link to my LinkedIn profile as well, Dennis. Yeah, so LinkedIn is the easiest one to find me. I have a website, so it would be myfullname.com, and I can pass on all of the links to you, and you can just put them down in the description for the podcast.
Yeah, I'll put all the links in the description. Cool. So any last words of advice before we leave this conversation?
Oh, great question. Love yourself, work on the soft skills of yours, and just be you, independent of trends. Social, online, just be you. Because if you are you, the right time will come and you will get the reward for what you're so looking for to get.
Good advice. Simple, straightforward, to the point. It's profound as well. Thanks, Veronika. Thanks for sharing some insights into your own journey so far, and telling us more about what you're doing in the world today and what you've learned so far as well. So thanks for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks so much, Dennis, for inviting me. It's an honor. I appreciate you. So, thank you.
My pleasure. So until next time, have fun and enjoy the process.